Nigel Adams.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and I very much welcome the opportunity to raise this debate in the Chamber this evening on the subject of large-scale solar farms. Now, there have been previous debates in Westminster Hall, and I know many honourable and right honourable members have raised concerns about the loss of food production, the planning process, and I note one or two colleagues in the Chamber this evening and may want to chip in throughout my remarks. Food security and energy security are competing requirements in our economy, and we must recognise that. And I would say, no doubt, someone will report this debate this evening. It's usually some sort of blogger on some eco site that we're all anti-renewable energy, which of course this debate is not and could not be further from the truth. In fact, it is quite the opposite. And I would like to start, Mr Deputy Speaker, by saying that electricity generation from solar has certainly been a major success and has come a long way in the last 12 years. Last Sunday at noon, 5.74 gigawatts out of a total of 33.1 gigawatt delivered by the national grid was from solar. Total solar generating capacity is now about 14.6 gigawatts, and the energy strategy objective is to increase this fivefold to 70 by 2035. I also understand that by the end of January 23, there were 1,360 operational solar farms covering about 100,000 acres. Additionally, it's estimated that there are another 160 solar farms approved, with several hundred more planning applications, including at least 7 of nationally significant infrastructure planning applications, which are over 50 megawatts in the pipeline. So this planning and construction pipeline could be equivalent to a further 150,000 acres of solar panels, the majority of which, Mr Deputy Speaker, would be ground-mounted on farmland. To date, this solar expansion has received a good level of public support. In my constituency, the first applications in 2015 were approved with the benefit of public support. They were typically 5 megawatts and located near industrial estates. But by 2018, 20 megawatt applications were coming forward, and by 2020, typical applications were just under 50 megawatts, the maximum under which the local planning authority was responsible for deciding the applications. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, there is public concern about the increasing number of applications and the more than tenfold increase in the size of some of these applications.
Will my right honourable friend give way?
I will give way.
Hancock.
As a supporter of solar energy, isn't the central point that if local support isn't there for projects because they're in the wrong place, then actually will undermine support for renewable energy? In my constituency, I've supported many solar projects and continue to support them now, but the Seneca project goes right round villages, it destroys local amenity, and the consultation has been woeful, and both county and local councils are against it, as well as the Culture Secretary, whose constituency it also covers. Isn't it precisely the point that if you support solar, you should support it in the right place and not rub people's backs up with terrible consultation for projects that should be sent back to the drawing board?
Well, my right honourable friend is correct, and I know how seriously he takes solar energy in his own constituency. We've talked about this previously. You've got to have the public on board. It's incredibly important that there's clarity as well, clarity for the public in the planning process, and that I'll come on to some of the points he raises in my remarks. I will give way before moving on.
I'm very grateful, honourable member. He's made some excellent points, and they'll certainly have been heard by my constituents in West Oxfordshire, who are subject to the Botley West proposal, or as it has been called locally, the Blenheim Power Station, because he's spoken about large-scale solar farms. The proposal in my constituency is to be the size of Heathrow, the biggest if allowed in Europe, the biggest ever allowed in farmland, and 76% of it on green belt. Now, what the Honourable Gentleman just said, about public support is absolutely right. We all support solar energy. But when they're of this size, when they have this irreversible impact on the local areas, it's going to subtract and take away from public support. Would he agree with me that in addition to power, we have to make sure we also protect amenity, farmland, food security and the character of rural areas?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We have to do all those things. And we have to ensure that, particularly with what's going on around the world with the conflicts, we have to ensure that our food security is protected. In my own constituency, we have a number of very large breweries, and they're very much dependent on local growers for their supply chain. So my honourable friend, the member for Witney, makes a brilliant point. And he also referred to farmland. So as the size of these solar farm proposals increase, so is the amount of productive farmland, which is... Well, it would be rude if I didn't give way to my very honourable friend, member for Strangford.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for Selby and the NC for bringing this forward. Where there is agreement with the community, yes, we can do it. But where there is not agreement with the community, we should not be doing it. I'd just like to make the case that the honourable gentleman referred to on behalf of a productive farmland. It's so important because we do at some stage want to become self-sufficient. We can only become self-sufficient if we keep the good land for the productive purposes that it is. Does he not agree that when it comes to solar farms, it has to be unproductive land and not the productive land, which can help us to be self-sufficient and not have to export and import from the rest of the world?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely spot on. And as I said, as these things increase in size, so does the amount of productive farmland that is taken up by these solar farms. And the description of best and most versatile farmland is often included in these proposals. Now, I understand that the NFU says that solar farms should avoid agricultural land of classification 1, 2 and 3A, which is as they put it, the best and most versatile land. And they advise that it should be avoided where practical. Now, also my understanding, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that the new NPPF guidelines may explicitly state that land used for food production gains additional protection in the planning system. I think that is something that many honourable and right honourable members here today would like to see, and so would our constituents. And I think that also offers some absolute clarity for local planning authorities as well. And this is a key question which my constituents and landowners want answers to. So my question to the Minister, of which there will be one or two more, is when could we have clear guidance? I appreciate this might not be my honourable friend's particular department. When are we going to get this guidance? And the changes to the NPPF would be indeed most welcome. Developers often state that land under and around solar panels as well can be used to graze animals. Now, grass for grazing, the last time I looked, requires sunlight to grow. But obviously the objective of a solar farm is to capture as much of the sunlight as possible. So I would argue that grass under solar panels is therefore very low quality, and the proposition, frankly, in my view, lacks credibility. There's also requirements for security fencing and CCTV surveillance. They've increased as these solar farms have suffered theft of the panels and the ancillary equipment. In 2021, 220 solar panels were stolen from a farm in Lincolnshire. Now, the need to connect solar farms as close as possible to grid connection is leading to clusters of solar farm proposals. And in July 22, a 50 megawatt solar farm was approved close to Campbellsford, which happens to be the village I grew up in and went to school, and very close to Drax Power Station. The application only received 2 objections and was supported by the parish council. The same developer has since applied for another 50 megawatt solar farm to the south of the village. Another developer Helios is preparing a 250 megawatt, 1,850 acre solar farm application to the west of the village. Then, just to the east, Boom Power are consulting on a fourth solar farm of 400 megawatts, which would cover nearly 3,000 acres in the constituency of my right honourable friend, the member for Halton, Price and Howden.
Will you give way on this one?
That's a very appropriate time to give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. I agree with everything that's been said so far. But even more than that, I mean, it is not just about preserving productive land, it's also preserving amenity. This 3,000-acre proposal will surround a number of villages in what is currently a beautiful piece of rural English countryside. And this proposal is essentially anti-democratic because it will not be decided by the local council, it will eventually go to the chief inspector. I asked all of the residents of those villages what their views were. So far, 50% have come back. 78% want this proposal stopped. But as it stands, there is no mechanism to do so. So it's essentially anti-democratic mechanism.
Well, I agree with my right honourable friend and neighbour. We need some clarity. We need government. We need ministers from, I suspect, several departments to come forward and provide honourable and right honourable members across this House and local planning authorities with that absolute clarity, given the cumulative impact of these large-scale solar farms. Now, my right honourable friend has a village which is likely to be, if all these planning applications go ahead, surrounded. The village of Campbellsford could end up being surrounded by solar farms. And by the way, this is a village that has approved a solar farm close by. But when you have this cumulative impact of huge solar farms, it does cause concern for residents, and understandably so. Now, all four of these solar farms I've just referenced include containers full of batteries on farmland. This is also worth pointing out, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The land to be used for the proposed Helios farm is almost all best and most versatile category 2 and 3A land. It currently grows cereals and root crops. About 60% of the land in the Boom Power proposal is in the best and most versatile, and 58% of the land in the Wade House Lane proposal is also best and most versatile land. In contrast, the three applications submitted in 2015 were all category 3B land, and therefore not within this classification, hence didn't receive the amount of objections that these large-scale proposals do. So we are talking about, in these four solar farms, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a total of 5,500 acres, or nearly 9 square miles, with a large percentage of it being best and most versatile agricultural land. I certainly will.
I thank you very much for giving way. That is precisely the concern of my constituents, that the solar farm that has been described by my honourable friend from Witney is just the tip of the iceberg, and that Oxford colleges will be looking to have a huge network of these around it, which will blight the Oxfordshire countryside for years to come.
Indeed.
My honourable friend raises a very good point, like most of the colleagues this evening. It would be interesting how many of those people who work at those colleges, who I guess are the developers of the site, would be prepared to live in the middle of it. So I also note there's a changing public response to solar farm proposals. There's definitely been an abrupt change in public opinion from support to opposition. There were only two objections to the first solar farm near Campbellsford. The resident group I met with a few weeks ago in Campbellsford, opposing the latest proposal, has almost 500 members. The most common objection raised about this project concerns the loss of productive farmland. They say the land for the Helios proposal could grow over 4,000 tonnes of wheat per year, or 10,000 tonnes of root crops such as carrots or parsnips. They point to brownfield sites, of which there are several in the Selby district, or the roofs of buildings. Crikey, we've got a number of ex-coal mine sites in the Selby district. Some large farm buildings have already been fitted with solar panels, which is the added advantage of providing power for energy-intensive operations such as grain drying, for example. Now, I appreciate we only have half an hour and the Minister needs to respond, but it also residents, and I'm sure it's the same for all colleagues here today, they have lots of other considerations when they're raising objections to large-scale solar. Loss of residential amenity, especially where your home's going to be surrounded by solar farms. Concerns about the safety of battery storage units in the light of fires and explosions at these large battery storage units. And also the temporary nature of the application, because when an application is given, it's a temporary approval. It was initially 25 years, and now it's 40 years, I understand. I remember when the Selby coalfield was given approval. That land was supposed to be returned back to farmland when mining stopped. Guess what, Mr. Deputy Speaker? That's not happened. So people have these concerns. They're concerned about the noise from the switchgear and the impact, the visual impact of the fences and the cameras, the low credibility of some of the biodiversity net gain proposals. I could go on, but I won't, because I know the Minister is itching to get to her feet to instruct us and tell us when we're going to have some answers to some of the questions raised by colleagues. But I would say I think solar power now has reached the point where it makes a significant contribution, and I think it can continue to make a significant contribution to our power generation. But we have to make sure it's done sensitively. And this is not just about using words. We need guidance. We need not just guidance, we need clarity on that guidance. I'm encouraged by some of the noises made about what could potentially be in the revised wording of the NPPF. But the proposals that are coming forward now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are much larger than we've previously seen. We're seeing an increasing level of opposition. You don't normally get this many colleagues and members of Parliament in the House for an adjournment debate. And if that opposition from communities and members of Parliament continues, this will impede our progress in terms of getting towards net zero. The points I've raised need to be addressed by the Minister, and I appreciate it may also require input from ministers in other departments. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my right honourable friend, the member for Selby and Ainsty, for tabling this important debate on large solar farms. I would also like to say in advance, if I am unable to answer any of the right honourable member's questions, then I will clearly get back to him at a later stage. I'd also like to acknowledge all the other contributions from right honourable and honourable members on this important subject. Decarbonising and securing the UK's energy supply is one of the biggest challenges facing us today. 2 years ago, the government adopted its sixth carbon budget, the world's most ambitious climate change goal to reduce emissions by 77% by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. Of course, 2035 isn't that far away, and the clock is ticking, and that is why, in our net zero strategy, the government committed to securing and fully decarbonising the UK's electricity supply. This will require a sustained increase in deploying low-carbon technologies such as solar alongside wind, new nuclear, battery storage and carbon capture, utilisation and storage. The dramatic rise in global energy prices following the COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine has only served to emphasise the urgency and demonstrate how crucial it is that we build a strong, homegrown, renewable energy sector to further reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and limit consumer bills. In the British Energy Security Strategy, the government committed to enabling a five-fold increase in solar development, up to 70 gigawatts in capacity by 2035, which will require a step change in deployment. Large-scale solar farms and smaller-scale commercial and domestic rooftop installations are all essential to meeting this commitment. Solar is a safe, mature, resilient and versatile technology that can be quickly deployed in a range of locations. Its carbon footprint is much lower than coal or gas. Solar is a key to the government strategy to decarbonise the UK's energy supply at a low cost. Large-scale solar is one of the UK's cheapest electricity generating technologies. Government recognises that deploying large solar projects, as with the new infrastructure, will have local impacts. Whilst government surveys indicate that solar is one of the most popular renewable energy sources, we fully appreciate that people living in the vicinity, as so eloquently explained of proposed developments, may be concerned about the effects on their local amenities. That is why solar developments of all sizes are subject to robust planning controls to protect local communities and the environment. My right honourable friend will understand that given the Department's statutory responsibility for determining individual planning applications for energy projects, ministers are unable to comment on the specifics of individual applications. But I can set out how planning the control works for solar in general terms. Planning applications for projects up to 50 megawatts capacity in England are determined by local planning authorities. Most solar projects in England fall into this category. Local authorities will consider a range of factors when assessing applications, including environmental impacts. Projects up to 350 megawatts in Wales are devolved and decisions are made either by local authorities or the Welsh Government, and planning in Scotland and Northern Ireland is fully devolved. For projects over 50 megawatts in England and over 350 megawatts in Wales, planning decisions are made by the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. Though the National Significant Infrastructure Project, or NSIP regime, which allows for rigorous scrutiny of such projects, the planning system sets out how decision makers should consider the impacts of local communities and amenities, particularly where a number of solar projects are deployed in close proximity. If designed carefully, the visual impact of a well-planned and well-screened solar project can be properly addressed within the landscape. Under both local and NSIP planning systems, developers must complete considerable community engagement as part of the application process. Members of the public can submit their views of the planning authorities, and significant concerns will be taken into account as part of the local decision-making process.
The Honourable Lady used the phrase, if designed carefully. It is not possible to design carefully a 3,000-acre site that surrounds 4 or 5 villages. That will, by definition, cause massive assault on the amenity of individuals living in that area.
Minister.
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Member for his intervention, take note of it and report it back to the relevant Minister. For LSP projects, members of the public can submit their views to the planning authorities, and significant concerns will be taken into account, as I said, as part of local decision making. The NSIP projects communities can participate in the formal examination process run by the Planning Inspectorate. This gives communities the opportunity to make their views known on and influence projects before decisions are taken. All large solar developments must complete an environmental statement for any application to consider.
I'm very grateful for the Minister giving way. Just before she moves on, does this mean that if a solar farm project is not well designed, then it won't be passed? Because the Somerset proposal in my West Suffolk constituency is very badly designed. It looks completely nuts from first principles because it's all over the place and around these villages. It damages the amenity of Newmarket and its globally significant racing industry. And nobody could argue it's well designed. So therefore, would she confirm that that should be at the forefront of the Minister's mind when the statutory decision is being taken?
Minister.
I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for that specific question, and he will understand that I cannot, I don't know the nuts project that he is talking about, but I again will pass that on to the relevant minister in this situation. All large, to continue if I may, Mr Deputy Speaker, all large solar developments must complete the environmental statement, as I've said. Decision makers will consider a range of factors, such as whether the project proposals allows for continued agricultural use, where relevant, or encourages biodiversity improvements around the proposed sites. Solar farms are temporary in nature, and most solar panel components and equipment can be recycled. I will, however, I recognise I've only got 2 minutes left, maybe 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'll be quick. She says designed to be temporary in nature, and certainly in the case of the development that I've referred to, the Botley West one, the proposal is, if you talk about 40 years or so, it's not really very temporary. That's very long term, and it's the case, isn't it, that these areas will never be the same again.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And again, with the Honourable Member's permission, I will take that back to relevant Minister and get back to him with an answer on that. I am also aware that I only have a few minutes left, so with your permission, I will just continue. Solar projects and agricultural practice can coexist. Many solar projects are designed to enable continued livestock grazing, and there is also a science of agri-voltaics developing in which solar is integrated with arable farming in innovative ways. Solar energy can be an important way for farmers to increase their revenue from land less suited to higher value crop production. There is also evidence that solar can improve biodiversity where it is installed on agricultural land. Protecting our environment, backing British farmers and delivering long-term energy security with more low-carbon energy are all at the heart of His Majesty's Government's manifesto. It is possible to maintain and increase our food production in a more sustainable way in some areas and to see land use change occur in others. Striking the right balance between different land uses is a challenging task, which will involve trade-offs. There are many uses of our land that we need to anticipate for the future, such as growing food, hosting low-carbon energy projects, planting trees, building homes, natural habitats, land for infrastructure and leisure and recreation. And in the Government's food strategy, we committed to publish a land use framework for England in 2023, which will help to inform how we manage these trade-offs. In terms of safety of these systems, when installed, maintained and decommissioned correctly, electricity storage poses minimal risks. To conclude, solar is a UK success story. Over 99% of the UK's solar capacity has been deployed since 2010. The technology's flexibility, low cost and rapid deployment can help to reach our challenging net zero targets, strengthen our energy security and bring new green jobs and economic growth. It is clear that this growth must be sustained and enabled by a robust planning system that balances these wider benefits with the local impacts.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As Miranda can say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.